Good afternoon. My name is David Harris, your destination lecturer. Today I'm going to tell you the story of the building of the greatest navy in the world, starting in 1898 through the dawn of naval aviation in 1911. Let's review the factors that contributed to the building of the fleet and the U.S. naval ships at that time. There was a surge of imperialism around the world by European powers in the late 1800s. The United States had to build up its navy to protect trade and to develop its naval power for defense. From the middle to the end of the 19th century, Great Britain ruled the seas. This was the American fleet: the USS Indiana, Massachusetts, the Oregon, and the Iowa. There were 4 great battleships, good sea power for the time. There were 2 second-class battleships, the Texas and the Maine, respectable but not great ships. The armored cruisers were the New York and the Brooklyn. Protective cruisers, the Marblehead and the Detroit. The Civil War monitor was considered a gunboat. They also had a few destroyers and some torpedo boats. Not an impressive navy at all. Let's look at why and how the Navy was improved. Let's review the Spanish-American War as a start. Just what was it? It was an armed military conflict that started in April of 1898 over Cuba's fight for independence from Spain. The war began with American support for Cuba's fight for independence. Spain did not approve of us interfering. The uprising in Havana prompted the United States to send the USS Maine to show our support for the revolution. The Maine was sunk in Havana Harbor. America was very upset by the sinking of the Maine. Yellow journalism by Hearst newspapers added to the uproar. The war ended after victory for the United States. That's a summary, but let's look at how it started. In January 1898, there was a riot by Cuban independent volunteers who broke out in Havana. The riot caused the United States to send a Marine force to the island. Pro-Spanish Cubans were offended by the United States' presence and support for the Cubans' independence. Washington then informed the Consul General in Havana that the U.S. Maine would be sent to protect the United States' interests. The Maine arrived in harbor in February. Spanish authorities in Cuba were aware of the American intentions, but showed the men of the Maine every courtesy. In order to avoid trouble, the Maine's commanding officer did not let the enlisted men go ashore. On February 25th, at 9:40 p.m., an explosion was heard in the harbor, resulting in the sinking of the Maine in Havana Harbor, with the deaths of 266 U.S. sailors. American investigation reported that the explosion was caused by a Spanish mine. The Spanish attributed the event to an internal explosion on the Maine. Believe what you must. Newspaperman William Randolph Hearst came to the conclusion that Spain was to blame. He raised America's anger by publishing sensational and astonishing accounts of the atrocities committed by Spain against America. William Randolph Hearst's illustrator, Frederick Remington, told him conditions in Cuba were not bad enough to warrant a war. Hearst told him, "You furnish the pictures, I'll furnish the war." The Americans were angered by the reports in the press. The American cry of the hour became, "Remember the Maine, to hell with Spain." President McKinley then asked Congress for authority to send troops to Cuba for the purpose of aiding their civil war. Congress agreed and demanded that Spain withdraw and told them we would use military force to help the Cubans gain their independence. The resolution ultimatum was sent to Spain. Spain broke off diplomatic relations with the United States and declared war. These are the front pages of the Hearst Journal and the New York Times. Look at the difference of space given to the war by each paper. The war started April 25th. The Spanish government dispatched the fleet under Admiral Cervera to defend Cuba. On May 25th, the Spanish fleet arrived in Santiago Harbor. 2 days later, the North American Atlantic Squadron arrived and began blockading the harbor. Cervera knew he'd have to fight his way out. He decided to delay his leaving until Sunday morning, hoping to catch the American fleet while it was conducting church services. Admiral Sampson pulled his flagship, the armed cruiser New York, out of line to meet with his ground commanders. The blockade was further weakened by the departure of the Massachusetts. Spain's 4 cruisers started to leave the bay. The Brooklyn battleships started to intercept. Cervera did not want the whole fleet exposed to gunfire from American ships. He turned his flagship to cover their withdrawal. Cervera began opening fire on the Brooklyn and the battleships. The Spanish fleet raced for open water, but they were slower than the U.S. fleet. After more than an hour's fighting, the U.S. fleet had destroyed all but one of the Spanish ships. The only survivor, the armed cruiser Cristobal Colon, continued fleeing along the coast. This allowed the battleship Oregon, which had just completed a voyage from San Francisco around Cape Horn, to move forward. Following an hour-long chase, the Oregon opened fire and forced the Colon aground. The Battle of Santiago marked the end of the large-scale naval operations in Cuba. The Spanish Navy was unwilling to risk any additional ships in Cuban waters. The Spanish garrison in the island was successfully cut off. Let's look at the ground war. That's it.